What I wanted to start by doing, actually, was I wanted to start by congratulating the Liberal Democrats on junking their obsessive commitment to everything to do with Brussels and the European Union. As there aren't any Liberal Democrats here, it rather reduces the point of my doing so. I do think it's remarkable, and I think that, in fact, it's good political tactics. Some of you come from the southwest, and you'll be very well aware that the good folk of the southwest seem to be more Eurosceptic on the whole than the rest of the country, and I think that one or two Liberal seats in the southwest will be greatly at risk if they go on with their absolute commitment to the European Union. There are apparently blind enthusiasm for it, and the fact that even Nick Clegg has been prepared to at least tone down the rhetoric a little bit, I think is encouraging. We were talking earlier on about whether we were winning the argument. And who knows, perhaps we are. It is not only, however, good political tactics for the Liberal Democrats. I would argue that it is simply common sense. Now I'm going to carry on as if I had a Liberal Democrat audience here and make a few remarks that actually do bear repeating. Because if you start talking to pro-Europeans and leftists and people of that kind, and you admit that you're actually a Eurosceptic, they immediately jump to a sort of stereotype conclusion. If you're a Eurosceptic, you're a little Englander, you are xenophobic, you hate foreigners, you're an isolationist, you want to blow up the Channel Tunnel. I don't need to blow up the Channel Tunnel, it was already done as last week. I have to tell you that in my case, and I think in the case of most Eurosceptics that I know, absolutely nothing could be further from the truth. I personally regard Britain, and I think most Eurosceptics do, as a great global trading nation. That is our lifeblood, that is what we do. And before I got into politics in 1999, I had a proper job for more than 30 years. And my proper job with a number of major companies was always an international business, and about 12 years of my career actually was spent living, resident, running businesses not only outside Britain, but outside the EU, mainly in East and Southeast Asia, and I've worked a bit in America, and so on. So I regard myself as a very strong internationalist, and I'm in favour of international cooperation and international trade. But I rather sympathise with the slogan of the Norwegian No campaign. You recall that the Norwegians were fully expected to join the European Union at much the same time as Sweden did. And at the last minute they had a referendum, and the wise Norwegians voted no, because they seemed to want to keep their hands on their oil and their fish, which when you think about it was quite a smart move. And the slogan of the No campaign in Norway was quite simply this: it was "Europe is too small for us." And that is exactly the case. We are, as I say, a global trading nation, and to link ourselves uniquely or primarily or even preferentially to one local area defined merely by geography, you have to say, well, why? There is no sense in doing it. There is no sense in if we said we will primarily trade with America and everybody else could be also rats, people say, what are you thinking of? But we apparently are prepared to say we will primarily make European nations our trading partners, and therefore to an extent disadvantage the rest of the world. Actually disadvantage the rest of the world considerably, because the European Union, which now sets our trade policy, I mean for the last 30 years we haven't had a trade policy. The European Union in Brussels sets our trade policy. They have set up trade deals with countries all around the world, and I've written about this at some length. They have been favourable towards countries which are former colonies of continental European countries, and they have been less favourable to countries like America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, India. Strange, isn't it? They're finally catching up with one or two of those, but we have definitely had the Commonwealth in a backseat position in terms of trading policy. The other thing is, it's not just shall we choose this bit of the world or that bit of the world. Some bits of the world are doing better than others. And a number of major organisations, including the European Commission itself, and the OECD and the United Nations, have done studies of patterns of global trade over the next 3 or 4 decades. And the sort of predictions they are making are quite striking. America will, broadly speaking, hold its share of the world trade over the next 3 or 4 decades. Countries like China and India will substantially increase their share of world trade over the next few decades, and guess what? Europe's share will virtually halve. Now, that's very sad for Europe. But why would we choose to link ourselves preferentially to the one area of the world that is going to do relatively much worse than many other areas we could be trading with? I'm not saying we shouldn't trade with Europe. Of course we should trade with Europe. But we shouldn't set up deals that focus our minds on Europe at the expense of the rest of the world. And Europe, of course, is fearfully protectionist. Now again, I'm a believer in free trade. Europe is scraping the barrel at the moment to find every possible excuse to be protectionist. They dress it up in other clothes. The Green Movement has given them a wonderful opportunity. If we put in place wonderful controls on carbon emissions, we make ourselves wonderfully green in Europe, how can we then import goods from countries with lower environmental standards that haven't done all that we've done to protect the climate? And we can have another meeting about climate, we'll leave that on one side for the moment. When we have high standards of high wages and high labour standards and health and safety and all those good things, how can we import products from countries where they have lower standards? The International Labour Organization wants higher standards. Every one of these ploys is a device to enable Europe to protect itself against foreign competitors. And of course, if you look at the common agricultural policy, it is nothing but a vast protection scheme. I get so frustrated with the bien-pensant liberals who think, I'm sure there aren't any here, liberals who think it's a terribly good thing to eat fair trade, to drink fair trade coffee. Actually, if they want to do something for farmers in the third world, forget about fair trade coffee, just dismantle the common agricultural policy. That would be the best way to start. My good colleague Daniel Hannan, whose name has already been mentioned today, has said that the European Union is making us poorer and less democratic and less free. And I often quote Dan because he often puts things much more succinctly and cogently than I'm able to do myself. And I think that sums it up in a nutshell. If you look at prosperity, people say, I hear all sorts of people saying, well, look at the trade we get in the European Union. Look how much better it is now. Look how much richer we are than we were 40 years ago. But if you go to any part of the developed world, you go to America, they're much richer than they were 40 years ago. You go to Shanghai, they're much richer than they were 40 years ago. So it's a bit difficult to say, well, it's uniquely in Europe because we formed the European Union that we're richer than we were 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. And of course we do benefit from trade. There is no question that we are better off trading in Europe without tariff barriers and with arrangements to allow the free movement of goods than we would be if we had national boundaries and national customs tariffs in 27 different countries. Nobody can argue with that. But you can quantify, well, thank you very much, but you'd be wrong. You can quantify the benefits, and don't take my word for it. Take the word of the European Commission for once, the word of Peter Mandelson, because they've made various estimates, but they all come out about 1.8% of GDP, that we are better off because of the benefits of trade. However,